Hello, welcome to part 3 of my free C# series. So now we're going to start off with arrays. We'll be talking about for each loops and methods. So an array is like a variable, but it can store multiple items. So you know x equals 2, right? But this one you can do 2, x could be 3 as well, x could be 5, x could be 8, so you could put a whole bunch of them into one variable. So let's create one of these. We could do string, and we could do wine. So if you like wine like me, what kind of wines we got? We got Merlot, we have Sauvignon, and we got Bordeaux. And from here, we can do console write line. And if we want to grab one of our wines, we do these square brackets and do 0 for Merlot, 1 is Sauvignon, 2 is Bordeaux. So it starts off at 0. Arrays always start at 0. So the first one is 0, the second one is 1, the third one is 2, just like that. So if I want to write out the first part of our wine array, then I put the brackets as a 0. And then if I launch my console app, shows Merlot. And now there's a couple ways to type out all of them. So in order to print out all 3 of them, we can do them on separate lines like this. And we get all 3 of them. However, if we had a big list of like 100 different items, or if you just don't want to type this out 3 times because it looks messy, there's a way we can just delete this, and we do a for loop. So we go for int I equals 0, and it's already gonna auto-generate this. So we don't even need to type that in. We could just do auto tab for completion, but basically we're doing for the index as long as it's 0. So if we're at Merlot, we're gonna grab the wine and we're gonna check to see the wine's length. So what's the length of the array? So ours is 0, 1, 2. So we've got 3 items in the length, and as long as the index is less than the length of the wine array length, then we're going to add 1 to it. We're going to print that out, and then we're going to go back up here and then go through this loop again until we've printed out each one of the wines. So when it prints out Merlot, it's going to go 0, then it's going to put 1 here to Sauvignon, then it's going to put 2 there for Bordeaux. Another way we can do this, another alternative, is we do what's called for each. With the for each loop, we could do string, and let's make the wine plural. So we could do wines. So for wine in wines, console write line wine. So for every 1 in the array, we could rename this. We could rename it to I if we wanted to. So it doesn't matter. I'm just going to make it wine because it makes more sense visually to understand what's going on. So for each string with wine in the wines array, we're going to write it out. So for every 1, that's what for each is. It repeats a finite amount of time. It repeats however many times that we want it to. So for each repeats a finite amount of times. So now if we hit run, it's going to give us all 3 of our wines. Now let's talk about methods. So methods are like functions. Functions are something that we talk about in other apps. In other programming languages. So you know Python, you hear function. Or if you're doing pre-calculus math, you got functions. And you know, actually this block here that we've been working from is a function, but in C# we don't say function, we say methods. And methods perform a section of code whenever it's invoked, and it can let us reuse code without writing it more than once. And the way that methods differ from functions is that methods just have a little bit of a different functionality and philosophy around object-oriented programming. And since C# is focused on object-oriented programming, that's why we use methods instead of functions. So we already have one method here that we've been working out of this whole course up until this time period. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new method. We'll name it static void. And we can make a quest for like a video game, let's say. So we'll do the cherry farm quest. And we're going to list a couple variables in here that we're going to use in this method. So we're going to have to specify these variables up in our main method. So the string is going to be a username that we're going to name Daffy. And then our int, the level, is going to be, let's say, 25. And then in here, we're going to invoke this. So we'll do cherry farm quest, username, and level. So now our username in our main method is going to be activated in our cherry farm quest here, being called in the main method block. And then we've got the other method block down here, which is going to be going into what this method actually is going to be doing. So this method is going to do console write line, welcome to my farm. Username. Oh, and that should be username here. I have a cherry problem. Many of my trees are missing cherries. I have a suspicion it could be those damn thieves living in the shack across the valley. Console write line. Would you investigate my cherry farm situation for me? So here would be like a quest. So every time your character invokes this quest, you wouldn't want to print all these console write lines out, right? It would be a lot easier to just write out this. This is way shorter. It's just one line, whereas this one is like 6 lines. When we run this app, we can see, welcome to my farm, Daffy. I have a cherry problem. Many of my trees are missing cherries. Blah, 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 blah. Would you... And we can add the level in here too, saying, you are strong enough at So now if I rerun this, it says, you were strong enough at level 25. Would you investigate my cherry farm for me? And then, Daffy would accept or decline the quest and go off and be a hero. So those are methods, and that's how it would be used in like a video game as a quest function. Now let's talk about methods overloading. So methods that would share methods, multiple methods sharing the same name. So we've got something called a signature, where the name plus the parameters equals a signature. So all methods must have a unique signature, but they don't need a unique name. So a way that we can do that is we can create a double, like a price. Then we do the price can be we can create another method called multiply. So down here we would do static double multiply, and instead of the integers we're going to use doubles, so we'll do double. And for this example they're using n and m, so that's fine. We could do a and b instead, but it doesn't really matter. And we do return n times m. And in this case, this is going to be 2 for n and 3 for m. And we can do console write line price. Now if we hit play, we can see that 2 times 3 equals 6. But now we can do another one called static double multiply. And we could do int n and double m. And here we would do, let's say, a and b. So I'm able to create both of these methods. And up here, if I want to call upon one of these methods, so we can have two methods that look exactly the same. And this one I could do double, let's say O, and then I put in another number up here, and then I do times O. And if I were to hit play on this, then it's going to give us this whole equation. So it's going to do 2 times 3 times 4. And you can just keep doing this over and over again, and this is what's called overloading. Now let's go ahead and talk about the return method. So return returns data back to the place where a method is invoked. So here we already have two methods, and I'm going to get rid of this one at the bottom. So we'll just keep this one, the n times m. And we're going to create a couple other variables here. We'll do double n, and we'll do double m, and we'll double a result. And we'll write the line enter in number 1 that we're going to assign to n. And we'll do the same thing for the second number. And we'll call upon the same function that we've got written down here. And we're going to read the line of result. And then we're going to do a modifier down here where we add a third letter again. So O, return, double O equals N times M. Then we're going to return C. We're going to return O, actually. So we'll do enter number 1, we'll do 7, enter number 2, 3. And now we see 7 times 3 is 21. Now let's talk params, short for parameter. A method parameter that takes a variable number of arguments. The parameter must be a single, a one-dimensional array. So that means we have an array. Let's create an array of, let's say, checkout prices. Come on. We'll do prices. Total prices 3.12, 15.4, and 55. And then we could do total to get the total. And down here we can start making the method that we're calling upon up here. And we'll name it prices, params, double. And the prices are going to be for the items. And we'll do double the total. And then we're going to do a for each loop where double the item in items. The total is going to be of each item. Then we're going to return the total. So using that return again. So now it's going to, this for each is going to go through each item within this array. And it's going to add together the sums of each of these prices. So that's how you use parameters. Then we can go on to conditional operators, which are used to see if conditions are true or false. And here's the syntax for a conditional operator. So we'll have a condition, and then we'll have an argument, and then the x is the true, and the y is the false. And depending on which one it matches up to with this argument is the one that it's going to pick between x and y. So the way that that looks is, let's say we have a temperature of 20 degrees. And we're going to give out a message depending on what the temperature is. So I'm going to write this with an if-else statement just to show you the difference between an if-else statement and a conditional operator. So here we're going to use temperature less than or equal to 15. And we'll do the message. It's warm outside. And then else message, it's cold outside. So in this scenario, and after our if-else statement, we could type in console write line message. So we can launch this and it says it's warm outside. And that's because we have above 15 degrees. So it says warm outside. If it was 5, it would say it's cold outside. So we've already seen this before in like the second video of this series when we were talking about if-else statements. So another way that we can do this exact same statement in just a one-liner is we would do message equals temperature less than or equal to 15, and then question mark is the argument. It's warm outside or it's cold outside. So this is the exact same thing as that if-else statement we wrote, and it's checking the temperature within the condition. Then it's going to create an argument asking whether or not this is true or if this is true. So based on this number, it is not warm out. Or it is warm outside, yeah, because we're 20. So we run play. And we need to remember to print out our message. So it's warm outside. String interpolation allows us to insert variables into a string literal. Interpolations always precede a string literal with a $, and curly braces are placeholders. So let's try a couple of these out to see what that all means. So we've got a string, username, young Nick. We got string profession. He's a librarian. And his level is 35. So young Nick is a level 35 librarian. So we can do something that says hello. Hello username. And this would print out hello username. So if I were to print this out, it says hello young Nick. But there's a different way we could do this. And the way to do it is by using string interpolation. So we're going to precede the string literal with the $. Okay? That means we start with the $. Then we type in hello. Then we use curly braces for the placeholder. That means in these curly braces, I'm going to put in username. And then I'm going to put in the profession. And now I was able to write out that whole statement within a single set of quotation marks. Instead of doing quotations around hello, then doing a plus sign, then username, and then another space, and then another quotation marks for the space, and then plus profession, and then plus another quotation just for the period, right? So this is a lot faster way to do it. It's way more optimized. So this would be the proper way of creating strings where you're passing variables into it. That's usually the best way that you could do it. And we can do you are level, do level so it says, hello young Nick the librarian, you are level 35. And we can even modify these within the braces. So we could do level -10. So if I were to write this now, then now it's added 10 spaces in between the number and the letter that comes after the braces. So this just put 10 in between there. And if we were to do just 10 by itself, then it's the other way around. So 10 like this adds 10 spaces in between this curly brace and this space right here. But if we do -10, it's going to go to the other side. Now let's talk about multi-dimensional arrays. So you know array, you got like wines, and then you got different kind of wines, you got multiple wines. So a multi-dimensional array is when you could put multiple into one. So let's just create some standard arrays to start with. So to invoke an array, you do string, and then you put in the brackets to show that we're going to be creating an array here. So we'll do string brackets race, and for a video game we could do like troll, human, and demon. That's not a race that you often see, but we're going to do it in this game. So we'll do string profession, we've got spell sword, librarian, and marksman. And then we can create an array for weapon types. So for weapon types, we can create a falcon, wand, and a javelin. Crossbow. I don't know how to spell javelin. So these are all just standard arrays. Let's now create a multi-dimensional array. So to create a multi-dimensional array, we have to put a comma in these brackets. And we could now create location. So to create multi-dimensions, we have to create braces inside of other braces. So in our first set of braces, we're going to create forest, jungle, prairie. And now, for the next set, we can create mountains, island, desert. And then we'll do wasteland, Arctic, and coastal. In between here we need to have little commas to separate these, and then finally a last curly brace here. I missed a comma here. We don't need that space, we don't need that space. So as you know, if we wanted to call upon troll, so let's say console.writeLine race, we know that the first one is troll, so that's 0. If we wanted to print out troll, we put a 0 in. If you wanted to put out human, you would put a human. But now for multi-dimensional arrays, you would put in location. And then for location, the 0 would signify the first array. The 0 would signify which array we're talking about. So is it the first array, the second array, or the third array? The second 0 is which item within that array we're talking about. So if I were to select forest, it would be 0 and 0, because 0 is first. So this is the first array, which is 0, and then 0 is the first item, which is forest. If we wanted to select Arctic, we would do 0, 1, 2, which is, this is the third array. So we're going to do 2 for the third array. And then 0, 1 is Arctic, so that's 0, 1. So 2, 1 would print out Arctic. So now we could do for each string race in location, console.writeLine race. So to work with this, we're going to do for each player, for each string of, let's say we're going to say player, so for each player in race, console writeLine player. So for it to play this, it's going to type out all of the different player types. And if we wanted to go through the multi-dimensional array, we could do for int I equals 0, I is greater than equal to the length of the location. So this is going to go through and pick out all 3 of these arrays. So it's going to go through 0, 1, and 2. But it's just going through the array by itself, but it's not going through the inner part of the array. So if we want to get into it and print out each iteration of each array, then we are to do another for loop. So if int j equals 0, and then int j is less than profession length, not profession, location, sorry. And we use get length here too. No, just length, okay. Yeah, get length, signifying that this is going to be the first thing that it's going to go through. And then get length, we're going to put in a number 1 for the second part that it's going to go through. And then for each of these iterations, we're going to do console writeLine, location, I, j, and then we're going to separate them all with a space. So now if I were to print this out, it's going to give me each one. So the first time it runs through this, it's going to grab the first array. So it's going to look at the first array with I. For I equals 0, this is looking at this first set of arrays. Then for int equals j, it's going to go into that array, and then it's going to grab the first one, the second one, and the third one. Then it's going to check for a fourth one. But when it checks for a fourth one, it sees that this condition is no longer true. So it stops it, and then it goes out here, where it loops back around to the top one. Then it goes to the second array, and it does the same thing as last time, goes through everything. Then it goes to the third array, does the same thing, and then the fourth time it's going to go through it and check that this is no longer true. So it's going to go out of the statement, and that's done with that function block. And that's how it's going to print out all of these locations. Now we can also change things in our array and in our multi-dimensional arrays. So we could do race 0 equals, instead of troll, we can do an orc. And for location, And for our location, in order to change forest, we would have to specify the first array and the first item in the array. And we can rename it to, let's say, woods. And we can also rename prairie by selecting the first array and the third item of that array. We could rename prairie to, let's say, plains. And if we wanted to rename wasteland, we could do the third array and the first item in the array. And we could rename wasteland to badlands. So now if I were to print this out again, we could see that orc is now replacing troll. We now have woods instead of forest, plains instead of prairie, and badlands instead of wasteland.